straight back into it with the Daily Mail. The BBC has been accused of infusing its TV shows with a left-wing bias. Who'd have thought that, Steve?
Yeah, Daily Mail, big fans of the BBC.
They are massive fans.
They say that the BBC is warping modern Britain by allowing left-wing woke viewpoints. Ting! We've not had that word so far today, have we? In storyline dramas, including EastEnders, Sherwood, Vigil. I must admit, I don't watch any of these. Yes. I think this, annoyingly, is both right and wrong. So it's a piece of research for the Campaign for Common Sense. The thing about biases is that you'll find the bias that you look for. Yes. I remember from my time of working at the Beeb, both as a broadcaster and technically an actor, that you get complaints from both sides, because both sides see the complaint. Oh, the BBC, it's this absolute mouthpiece of the government. Oh, they're Tory-loving, ... So you get those messages. Yes. And then you get the ones say, you woke left-wing, blah, blah, blah.
But, Steve, what I would say is that I think when it comes to political impartiality, left versus right, Labour, Tory, I think the BBC do quite a good job. But I think it's kind of undeniable that they have a woke bias, which is nothing to do with left or right.
In their dramas.
Which is what they in their corporation.
And their arts.
People I know who work there have said the same to me, and I think... But you can just see it in the dramas. They become very preachy.
That's where I think it comes from. Because we hate the BBC in the Daily Mail, we have to talk about the BBC. This is probably true of absolutely... the ITV would be included in this,
a very good point.
All your streaming ones, because, and this is the problem with broadcast media, it's run by people in the arts, with their MAs, and they're not understanding the periodic table. These people shouldn't be allowed to run things. But I do think there is a left-wing woke bias within the arts.
Well, as you know, I don't think it's left-wing at all, but I do think it's identitarian and preachy, and you're right, it's there in Netflix, it's there on Paramount, it's everywhere, isn't it, Nick? Well, it's not just the BBC, it's a bit unfair, really, to single them out.
But we are going to, because we love the BBC. We love the BBC here because they created the need for this channel. So we love the BBC here. But also, this group, Campaign for Common Sense, suggested I should be on the BBC more. So I think they're a brilliant group. You were in the list as well, and did you see it? It was a couple of years ago. Campaign for Common Sense presented a list of non-woke comedians who should be on the BBC. I was on there. You were on there. Titania was even on there. And Scott Capurro was even on there. And Simon Evans. Steve, you didn't make it.
I was on the BBC.
That's the problem.
Be on that list.
Because you're super woke. So, so obviously I love the Campaign for Common Sense. They've got loads of common sense. It would take extraordinary discipline to be the BBC, get all that free money, and not think, I could use this for social engineering. It would take extraordinary integrity. And I think a lot of people behind the scenes do have that. But it's not because I know some of them. But on an overall level, they seem to really be struggling. Like you say, the woke bias in the arts programming is absurd.
But is it that conspiratorial? I don't think it is that they're thinking, let's socially engineer the world. I think it's just the way they think. They think like an alternative viewpoint is just abominable and should be silenced, and that's just part of their thought process.
They don't even necessarily think that. They're just not used to it. So to be really fair, I'll speak to people who I know in North London, and I'll just say normal things that I say, like, hey, the family could be a good idea, and of course they go mad. But they don't know other people with different views. Broadly speaking, they're in North London, they've all got similar views, so they don't realise that they're in a bubble. I don't want to be too rude when I'm saying bubble, but they're in something of a bubble, and they don't necessarily realise it, and so it's very hard for them to be objective about the country as a whole, I imagine.
But that's interesting. You mentioned the idea that the family is a good thing for society. I suppose that is in TV a lot, but you don't see it because you agree with it. Whereas when you get EastEnders saying this, there's a line that they quote in this. EastEnders said, we've had Brexit and COVID, we don't need you. Which is clearly just a joke. And if you're getting upset about, how dare...
No, but also that could make sense from a certain type of character. Yeah, so that wouldn't problem.
No, but to be fair, they had a character, and I can't remember if it was Coronation Street or EastEnders, but they were like a vaccine skeptic. Then suddenly they were also a Nazi. There is loads of this stuff. And EastEnders during the height of COVID is like, you're not wearing a mask. There was loads of propaganda.
My point is the things that bother you spot, but probably EastEnders...
It all bothers me, Steve.
The whole channel. EastEnders is filled with families, so you see all of these things that do agree with your point of view, but you don't notice it.
There's no
The nature of confirmation bias is
there's loads of families.
There's nothing on BBC that I agree with.
I saw a really good polyamorous family on Doctors the other day.
There's nothing on the BBC I agree with, except Man United winning sometimes on Match of the Day. That's all.